Today I'm going to talk a little bit about communications and this world that we're kind of living in, and some trends and some ideas that I have about strategies for how we communicate in this modern world. And what I hope is that everybody in this room strongly disagrees with some of them, because I want to have a dialogue back and forth about how we communicate in this modern world. The first thing I want to do is, before we get started, I want everybody to take out their phone and tablet. Take it out of your pocket and hold it up for me. Okay, everybody now. Come on, don't hold back. I know you all got them. Okay? Good. Now put them in your lap, and when I get boring, look at them. Okay? And if you want to leave the ringer on, that's okay. All right? Because that is rule number 9, or trend number 9 that I'm going to talk about, which is attention is the new scarcity. Okay? So, remember, I've got to be better than the emails, tweets, likes, Instagrams, and all the other interruptions that are heading toward you. Oh, yeah, you should. You really should. But then that doesn't count against my time, right? So anyway, what I'm trying to do is boil it down to, as a marketer and a communicator, we always tried to figure out, how do we talk to people? How do we talk to our customers? How do we communicate? Amy earlier talked about digital immigrants. I'm a digital immigrant. I can remember a time before cell phones, color TV, Apple, Microsoft, the works. So us people from the old country, we don't always have the language down and all the terminology. So I apologize to some of your younger people who, if I say flash cube or bring up some old dead technology, just it's like your grandmother from Sweden who, Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the world we live in. At last count, and this is just from a couple days ago, every month there are 100 billion internet searches. Every month. This is around the world. Which means that 1.2 trillion per year. Or 40,000 searches per second. Okay? So how long have I been talking? Multiply that by 40,000. When you search, the top 3 results get 80% of the business. By business, I mean clicks, however you want to measure it. But if you're not in the top 3, you're in trouble. There are 30 hours of new content added to YouTube every 1 hour. Which means there's more than a day's worth of viewing added to YouTube every hour. At last count, Amazon was selling $671 worth of merchandise every second. Oh, boy. We should have bought some of that stock, huh? Anyway. So that is the world that we're living in. So what I've tried to do is to say, okay, so what does it mean? So I've boiled it down to some things. And the first, and these are not immutable laws because they are not laws at all. They're just my own personal opinion. And I really hope it gets discussion going, people challenge each other and talk about it. But here's what I see. In this new world, consumers want to participate. Right? The ironic thing about the advertising communication business is that in the last 50 years, we've done a really, really good job of convincing you not to trust advertising, right? In our desire to sell you things, we've gone to any tactic whatsoever to make you buy. So you ask yourself this question today. What do you trust more? Do you trust an ad? Or do you trust that customer review down at the bottom of Amazon or some other aggregation site, right? What do you trust? Well, I would suggest that that is indicative of this. That consumers today want to participate in the decision about consuming products. They're not just going to take my word for it anymore. What does that mean for communicators, for marketers? I don't know. Rule number 2, rule, task, I don't know. We have complex relationship with media. In 1970, if you wanted to talk to 60% of this country, all you had to do was to buy an ad on the 6 o'clock national news on ABC, CBS, and NBC. You could talk to 60% of the country. Today, that number is less than 10%. So what's happened is people's need for information about goods and services obviously has never changed since one caveman told another caveman, hey, where did you get that mastodon? And he told him, you went down by the big rock and took a right, and there's a whole bunch of them there, right? Where people go for that information has changed drastically, which for consumers has created really difficult or complex relationships with media. It used to be very clear what was advertising and what was editorial, right? And in fact, there used to be this kind of so-called iron curtain at newspapers and television stations and all this stuff. And the ad guys never talked to the editorial guys because they wanted purity. Guys, that is all gone. It is completely gone. And anymore, I would suggest that we don't always know what is editorial, and we don't always know what is advertising. And so that whole world has really blended. Here's another interesting thing about our complex relationships with media. You know that Facebook ads have a response rate similar to direct mail? What? Direct mail, 98% of all direct mail goes directly into the trash. Response rates for Facebook ads are less than 2%. Have we just created more digital junk mail? We're not cutting down trees, but we're still polluting the space. Complex, isn't it? The next thing. Everything is media. Everybody knows that when you pick up your phone now and you go to an app, they're trying to sell me something, right? They're everywhere you go, every device. People are trying to advertise at you. You know, more people go into Starbucks every day than read Time magazine, or read People magazine, or read Martha Stewart magazine. Does that mean Starbucks is media? Does it? Then what does Starbucks do about that? What does it mean? The circulation of Time magazine is 3.2 million. That's probably ink on paper and digital. The circulation of Martha Stewart magazine, 2.1 million. The circulation of a magazine called Costco Connection, 8.6 million. The circulation of AARP magazine, 22.5 million. Costco and AARP are not magazines. They're advertising vehicles disguised as magazines, but they have larger circulations than all the publications that we grew up with. Everything is media. Oops, hold on. You guys all know this. Community is our new source of content. Facebook just passed 1 billion users, right? I read a thing the other day, and I don't know that I believe it because it's media, and I don't know if it's editorial or advertising that's coming at me. More people are using Instagram now than are using Twitter. Who believes that? Is Instagram 2 years old yet. I know it's owned by Facebook now. Pardon? They paid a couple of dollars. Yeah. You guys all know this. The average 18 to 24-year-old sends around 3,200 texts per month. Community, right? Community is their new source of content. Consumers do business with human brands. I think we all know that. I think we all see that, how important it is, not only the products and services that you provide, but the people and beliefs behind those products and services in this next modern communication is just as important. We saw how quickly Mr. Cook from Apple was ready to come out and apologize for this map flub up that they had in the iPhone 5. Consumers join forces to exert influence. We all saw how technology, we all saw how communication affected the Arab Spring thing a year ago. Do you all remember how, was it Bank of America wanted to charge $25 for something that they shouldn't have been charged $25 for? And that basically got put down digitally. And the pressure and the influence was so great that they backed off. Well, what does that mean in terms of the way that we communicate, motivate, and persuade consumers and customers? I think in this world, good is better than perfect. The pressures to get to market are so great that if you follow the classic examples of the old days to create a product, test a product, go through focus groups, go through revisions, go through focus groups, launch, soft launch, all those things, you're done. You know, the market has moved so fast by you that you now have to, you know, in the old days we used to think of 1 and 2 and 3 year marketing plans. You know, we'll do this and then we'll do this and then we'll do this. I would suggest that the marketing plan has basically evolved into, I think, what engineers call a constant feedback loop, right? We do as good as we possibly can, and we put it out into the marketplace. We get feedback, we learn, we optimize, we keep going. That's a pretty fundamental change. What does it mean? I don't know. We all know about this one. There's a new definition of quality, and it's created by the users. How many people in this room have bought a product online and they've made their decision whether to buy that product or not based on the user comments or the user reviews that are embedded into it, right? So in the old days, the manufacturer, the creator of the product would tell you this is really, really good, and we don't necessarily have to believe it anymore because the user is running the show. A couple more. This is where we started, kind of. Attention is the new scarcity. We're bombarded by 5,000 marketing messages per day. And if you go to the grocery store, it's probably more. But when systems are bombarded with that much information, it's natural to create filters to try to figure out what is important and what is not important. Because if you tried to fully engage in 5,000 marketing messages a day, you wouldn't have time for anything else. And in a very short time, you'd probably be singing really bad jingles and slowly going crazy. But so we need to think about that. What does that mean? We talked about this out at the farm the other day, but at the agency that I used to have, people working on the Microsoft account used to get in excess of 300 work-related emails per day. And I used to ask, well, geez, that's 40 per hour. How long do I have? When do I work? And I think Stacy brought up a really good point that this notion of that you have to make that decision to control your time and control your effort. University of Maryland. Sorry about that. The University of Maryland did a study recently where they asked 1,000 people to put down their cell phones for 24 hours. And a lot of people reported that after a very little bit of time that they were twitchy and itchy, and a few of them even broke out in hives. Which I thought was really, really funny until at the end of the article that I read, they kind of mentioned that 70% of the people dropped out of the study. They just couldn't go 24 hours without their phone. Who's looking for your attention? Who's trying to get your attention? And this kind of the last one kind of leads into some of the things I said and talked about earlier, and it's really around that notion that we live in a world where we have to action before clarity, and that is so very, very different than the cycles and the pace that we used to work on. I used to do campaigns for Vail Ski Resort, and we would start working on campaigns in January that would run in publications in September. So we would literally have 9 months to come up with a concept and go through all the systems, and then it would come out in magazines in September. Those time things have been really, really shortened. And so in the world that we used to live in, we talked about, ready, fire, aim, ready, aim, fire, right? That was the world we lived in. Make sure I zero in on my target. And so I intentionally titled my speech Ready, Fire, Aim, because that's the world that we live in. And I don't know if it's good or bad, right or wrong. I'm sure that some people are doing a much better job navigating in that world than others. But what I've tried to do is to come up with items and things like this just as filters and guideposts for when I think about trying to communicate with people, whether it's for marketing purposes or internal communications at companies, or just the way that people work and interact and get around these days. So that's pretty much what I have. I mean, we live in a world that is drowning in information and starving for meaning, and how we approach communicating in that world, organizing our thinking and developing messages is going to have a huge impact on our ability to, as Dan talked about, move the ball down the field a little bit, move the agenda forward. So good luck with that. I would love to hear everybody's own list of 10 or less of 5, or say that one doesn't apply because this one applies. I'd love to hear your thinking on it. And the purpose of my talk more than anything was to get the conversation going about how we converse and communicate with each other. So thank you very much, Yarrow. Thank you so much. This is a wonderful event.
Thanks, Tom. We're going to field a few questions for Tom, and then we're going to bring Dan back up on the stage in case you guys have any questions for both of them and the company they run together.
So I was wondering, do you think that this constant connection that we have, everybody has with cell phones and all that, is creating like actually a constant disconnect? I mean, my brother sits at Thanksgiving dinner with the phone on the table, and my thought is, who's texting you during Thanksgiving dinner? But it seems like the anonymity and the constant escape from reality that your phone and the internet can give you is actually making people in this day and age like a lot ruder and a lot, they call it social media, but it seems like everybody's social to me. And I was wondering if you think that's a problem, and if so, how serious of a problem?
I don't know how serious it is. I think it'll obviously work itself out. I think people will start to maybe start going the other way. You remember that famous New Yorker cartoon where the couple is sitting across from each other at the fancy dinner table and he's texting to her, "I feel so close to you." And I always thought, yeah, but I think, this together alone concept that we hear about. Why do people have 3,200 texts a month? Do they really need to be that connected, or is there something in their psyche about they don't want to be alone? Or maybe they will have a wired reality and then they'll have a more human one-to-one reality. I don't know, but I think it's certainly something to think about and discuss. Mm-hmm.
Tom, I really appreciated your talk, and you're hitting on something really deep, because what this group's about and what Yarrow and this team have put together is really people who want to create cool, wonderful, beautiful things that change the world. But the problem is, in order to do that, it takes a really special human thing, and that's concentration and focus on complex problems for extended period of times. And the technologies that we use basically are intended to compete for our attention, to distract us from that. And so I think one thing that we really need to consider is, how do we teach young people to break away so they can focus, to create difficult, beautiful, wonderful things? And that is not easy to do. As a professor who deals with these young people, it's really hard to break them away. But the problems we confront are far more complex, far more complicated than ever, and they take more attention than ever. And there's tons of science to support the notion that our ability to multitask is a complete intellectual fraud. We cannot do it. And so I think what you're hitting on, there are bigger implications that we need to consider. So I really appreciate you bringing it up.
No, I think that's a really key point. I'll tell you, some of the people in my office who were working on Microsoft and just getting deluged, they finally went into a thing that 3 or 4 days a week, they would load into Outlook an out-of-office message that would basically say, from 1 to 4 o'clock today, I am at the office and I am working, but I am not available to take calls, answer emails, or receive emails. And it worked for some and it didn't work for others. Again, I think we have the other side. When you apply it to work, is when I was growing up, and most of all our parents, there was a very clear definition of at work, not at work, right? We even had punch clocks, but that's gone, right? How many people have ever responded to or answered an email after 10 o'clock at night? There you go. Well, that would have been unheard of, right? How many people went back into the coal mine at 10 o'clock at night and just dug a little more coal? So but it is a problem, because you do have to have time to think, and you do have to have time to work. And if you're constantly interrupted, and if you don't have the self-discipline or the will to just turn it off and ignore it, then it's what they used to call out at Microsoft. They'd have these big meetings and everybody come in and put their computer down, and somebody who'd spent weeks on a really great presentation would make the presentation, and everybody be typing away on their computer, and they called it PADD, partial attention deficit disorder, right? Because all you had was their partial attention. And is that fair? I don't know, but in some big companies, that is very much a reality. This multitasking during periods when people should be thinking or listening. Yeah.
A couple things. I actually have a pretty loud voice. Okay. And a feisty personality. Okay. I think that there's several things. I think there's great good that's come from, say, for example, cell phones, and there are frustrating things. Mm-hmm. So a good thing that I can think of is a number of years ago, a man who lived in Bozeman named Alex Lowe was dying on a mountain in the Himalayas and was able to call his wife and talk to her before he died. Now, that wouldn't have happened, 30 years ago, I don't think. That's a pretty amazing thing to me, that he could connect with her at the last moments of his life when he was in such a remote place. And on the other hand, I think everybody's always had distractions. I don't know, if you go back to caveman or something. I have a friend who's an artist, and back in the day when, because we're both women of a certain age, that's the age that has gray hair and doesn't do anything about it, and she would just make it so that she didn't answer the regular phone, landline or whatever you call it now, when she was working in her studio. That was a distraction. I don't know how old television is. I don't remember how old television is, but we got one when I was 6 years old. And my parents would limit the amount that we were allowed to watch it, but as they got older and we kids were visiting them, they would be, shh, shh, my program's on, don't talk. You know, I'd travel to Phoenix from Bozeman to see them. I'd stay with them for a week, and they'd have all this TV that they needed to watch. So I don't think that it's necessarily the objects, the phone, the cell phone. I think it's the people that are the television. It's what you decide to do with it. I don't know. It just seems like there are great things about it and annoying things about it, and we kind of have to figure it out. But you actually already said that.
No, but I think that's a good point. But there's the other side that says we have decided what to do about it. The sales of smartphones have surpassed sales of laptops. The sales of tablets will probably surpass the sale of smartphones. And so in one respect, whether it's a cultural or a social phenomenon, they've kind of decided. I mean, Verizon and AT&T are two of the top 5 advertisers in the entire country from a dollar spent. That used to belong to the beer companies and the car companies, but not the wireless phone companies. But that's the truth. Verizon and AT&T are top 5. And they're driving this message forward, and who doesn't want to be able to pull something out of your pocket and check the weather, or send a text to somebody, or get a piece of information, or listen to a piece of music? You're right, they're wonderful devices. It's just how do we fit them into our lives? You know how I had a designer at my agency who used to come in really, really early, and the way that he resolved it was, if the phone he would come in like 6 o'clock, and if the phone would ring, he'd let it ring for like 2 or 3 times, and then he'd answer it, and he'd go, "It's not done yet," and hang up. And I always thought, well, that's a pretty good way to control it. Yeah, it's pretty safe. I mean, we didn't know if it was a client or who it was, but when you got that kind of frantic, "It's not done yet," well, it wasn't done yet, so give them some more time. So,
well, great, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's great to get insight, into your mind and into Dan's, and you guys work together. So I'd like to bring Dan back up, and I'm curious. Can you tell us like a little bit more about your company that you run together? I want to know how kind of your daily routine goes. You guys are both
Daily routine?
characters. Put that. I love. I could just imagine being a fly on the wall in your office and being very entertained. So give us a little insight into how you guys work together.
Well, on my
and then we'll
office-
field some questions for both of them about their company.
In my office, there are Washington flies, and in Dan's office, there are Idaho flies, because our whole concept is to build a company without an office, and build it in such a way that as long as, here we go again, as long as we have cell and network access, we can pretty much work from wherever we are. We don't have a great need to have people come in. We generally go to them. So it's a big experiment for us. And so we communicate regularly, constantly, back and forth.
Texting?
Nah, we don't text that much. We usually just phone and email is kind of how it works.
I used to say, this thing still doesn't work for me. You hear that? Does it work? Yeah. Okay. I used to say when we were doing a lot of communication work that the oldest definition of communication was the coolest, because it came from the old Latin communion, which used to mean for the like, the early Christians, communion meant coming together. So we used to use that as a benchmark in communication for our companies and for our clients, that if it's, you can use it at home with your significant other too. If it's not helping you come together, it's not communication. It's something else. You got to figure out what that is exactly. But we found that if we work that way, we can work not only with each other really well, coming together, but with our clients too. So I built a cabin in my back of my house, and I get up to work and I walk out about 30 feet, and that's my commute. But I have everything in there I need to write and communicate with clients. But I can still control the time a little bit too, so I can create.
Could you guys give us an idea of some of the clients you're working with right now and kind of the process you go through with them?
Well, mind you, this is brand new. So a lot of the companies that we expect to work with are companies that we worked with in a strategic communication or marketing or branding situation. So Boeing Aerospace, Lens Crafters, Sun Microsystems really needs to work on creativity and innovation these days. Nordstrom's. So it's a range of clients, and I would say this might be a little more useful. What I learned in working in the communication business when we were doing internal visioning and missioning and valuing, that kind of thing, is that don't try to go to companies that aren't sure they really love you and really want this. You look at a company, you go, wow, there's somebody that really could use this information and creativity and innovation, right? But they're not sure. They haven't hatched in a way. So it was okay. I actually learned just let go, because there's somebody out there really that loves this information, is ready. And the other thing I found, if you're going to work with people in creativity and innovation, or any other kind of strategic communication thing, a system-wide kind of thing, really a river rises no higher than its source. So if you can't get to the top of the hierarchy in an organization, it becomes much more difficult to start at a middle level and work up. So the faster we can get to the top and get somebody to say, you're right, this organization is committed to increasing the level of creativity and innovation for everybody in this company. How do we do that? Then it just facilitates everywhere. If you're trying to do it at the bottom, you're constantly doing it as subversives, because you're trying to change the whole system.
I think the other thing is that we fundamentally believe that innovation and creativity are the next wave for the most successful companies. We've spent the last 15 or 20 years getting leaner and meaner and total quality management and cutting everything to the bone. But as a result of that, a lot of companies are just kind of stuck in place. And we believe that most companies are really good at external communication, talking to the customers, but they're not really good at talking to their employees. And we believe that by instilling innovation and creativity into the company, empowering the employees, telling the employees that your ideas matter to us, creating a safe environment where they can come in and say dumb things, not only will you'll get beyond the classic suggestion box where people put a couple of lame things in there. You'll start to get hundreds and hundreds of ideas, but the added benefit that is really powerful is you will reduce the turnover at companies, because people leave organizations because they don't feel like they're being listened to, appreciate, or they have a voice, right? And turnover with larger organizations is one of the biggest kind of unaccounted for costs, because it's expensive to lose somebody, hire somebody, and train somebody. And so if you can go into organizations and say, bring this to the company, and it will reduce their turnover, they're all ears. But there's some companies that aren't going to be all ears, and you don't spend time with them. You just say, great, good luck. So they have to be ready for it, and yeah.
So one of the tools we use, just as an example, but those little cards you have there, imagine a card that's bigger, that has a story in it. Conception is a matter of connection. So to the degree that you can put some new information into somebody's brain, they can make different connections. They can bring their own experience to it and start making connections and come up with different ideas. So it works like this. So if management says, here's what we're going to do, we really want everybody to begin thinking in ways that are outside the box. We're not going to leave you to your own choices to do that. Not choices, but what's the word? Desserts to do that. Yeah, we're going to provide some new information for you that helps you think about things, and we're going to ask you to participate every day in writing down an idea, and you got to keep it in a small space. So, and an example of that would be so many examples. You know, some things in nature. Velcro, for example, was created by looking at a cockle burr. When you're a little kid, you throw those burrs and they stick to your clothes, kind of thing. Somebody looked at nature and said, "Oh, I see how that works," and they created a multi-billion-dollar industry. You know, the human eye it was the model for the camera. Drive-in banks were created by looking at drive-in movies, right? So one thing leads to another thing. So if I can give my employees some new information and ask them to build on that idea, not only ask, but give them permission to do it, and I take away the pressure of them trying to come up with, well, that's not practical, or I don't know how would work, and don't laugh at me if I do it, then what you get is a new habit pattern in your organization where people are welcoming ideas, they're appreciated for having them, you know, they get in the habit of having them, and then you get teams together that actually percolate some of the best ideas to the top. These are ideas that came from your own people, right? And then you build the practicality into them, and off you go. So it's not just saying have a better idea, it's provoking people and encouraging people and inspiring people and celebrating people when they have their ideas. Make sense?
I know I'm certainly one of those people who feel bombarded a lot of the time, and I don't have any trouble turning off my cell phone, my television, not answering the phone. It's interesting that 70% of the people in that study couldn't do that. But I also agree that digital advertising is like so much junk mail to me. What do you tell your clients about how you cut through the clutter and get some of this divided attention?
I don't know the answer to that. The only thing that is intriguing me right now is that there's 100 billion searches a month. And 1,000th of 1% of 100 billion is still a really large number. And I am consulting my clients and telling them, regardless of what you do, everybody's, you know, no one knows you're a dog on the internet, but everybody knows if your website's a dog. And so you need to work to manipulate, I guess that's what we call it, the search engines, so that you're one of the top 3 or 4 in whatever industry or category that you're in. And then you need to take your customer or whoever is coming to you, your website needs to be an adventure. It needs to be smart and intuitive and cool and that more than anything. Your website needs to be social. That more than anything is based on some of these things that I put today, that more than anything is going to persuade people to continue the conversation with you. You know, marketing used to be about the big idea. Marketing now is about starting a conversation. And those are fundamentally different things. And creative departments all over the country have really struggled with that because they're used to the big idea. But it's not, and the big idea gets attention, but you still have to be sophisticated enough to start a conversation with your customer. So, I don't know, it's, you know, media markets are a mile wide and an inch deep. And so, it's hard to know what to tell them. Beyond, make sure that you're one of the top results when you get searched.
All right, great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.